Hi, I'm Justin Ross, Director for Global Business Development at Orscheln Products. Today, we are coming to you from the Work Truck Show in Indianapolis. Here with me is Joe Johansson of Johansson & Associates. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Justin. It's great to be here with you today and the Orscheln crew in this great facility with all these exhibits. It really is a vibrant industry.
It absolutely is, and if we look at much of this year's conference, it is focusing on this idea of decarbonization, clean transportation, and some of the themes that we're seeing dominate many of transportation and commercial vehicle industry. Perhaps you could talk a little more about some of those themes and what you're seeing here at the show.
We're going to do that as we work through these various videos, but climate change is affecting our industry more than we recognize, I think, because as far as I'm concerned, the train has already left the station. The industry has accepted the fact that climate change is real. It is a polarizing debate, but nevertheless it's real, it's happening. How is our industry going to get through it? We are working on this decarbonization plan.
Yeah.
And every industry here is focused upon that, and we certainly are, and we hope to share that with you as we go forward over these next few videos to talk about the impact that it's going to have on our industry.
So how about we take a look at session 1 to tackle this topic of decarbonization, and indeed if the train has already left the station.
Decarbonization, session 1. What is it? Sometimes in the discussion we have about climate change, I feel like I'm walking through a minefield. Opinions are so absolutely polarized. On the one hand, we have people who will write books like Hot Talk, Cold Science, saying severe storms have not increased in frequency or intensity since 1970. Neither have heat waves nor droughts. Furthermore, alarmist climate scientists have hidden their raw temperature data and deleted emails, then undermine the peer review system to squelch debate. Yes, surely our society does need carbon fuels for its progress and its industrialization. But to what extent do we want that? Then on the other hand, we get people like the Natural Resources Defense Council who say, despite what climate deniers and fossil fuel lackeys claim, for instance, that the science on global warming is far from settled, there is nothing to debate. And in their crystal ball, they would see society and the earth turning into an absolute wasteland. So where do we want to be? Do we want to be in a position of accepting unlimited carbon-fueled industrialization? Or do we want a society where ecology reigns? As far as I'm concerned, the train has already left the station. We realize that industrial nations and industrialized companies have already decided what the outcome is. If you look at the automotive companies like Freightliner, Iveco, Volvo, Packard, Kenworth, Peterbilt, and so on, they have already decided that decarbonization needs to happen. They are spending billions of dollars right now developing electrified and hydrogen-powered power units. So what's the issue? Let's look at the periodic table. We have the two elements in question here, carbon and oxygen. One atom of carbon, two atoms of oxygen, forming carbon dioxide. So why is carbon dioxide so bad? Well, we have the CO2 cycle. A carbon cycle is a process by which carbon atoms continually travel from the atmosphere to the earth and then back into the atmosphere. However, with the CO2 coming from automotive use and factory emissions, this heat cannot escape and is trapped in the atmosphere, causing global warming. Here's an interesting chart which I picked up, and it shows two traces here. The one is global CO2 atmospheric concentration, and that's the darker of the two, and you can see from 1900 to 2015 how it increases very substantially. The interesting thing is that the other line, the orange line, which is total global fossil fuel consumption, tracks that of global CO2 atmospheric concentrations very closely. So what is decarbonization? Frost & Sullivan, a consulting company, calls it the steady reduction of CO2 emissions and eventually its elimination. They have 5 pillars of decarbonization, which they define as renewables, CCUS, which is carbon capture, utilization and storage, energy efficiency, hydrogen and electrification. As we talk about the automotive implications of decarbonization, hydrogen and electrification are the two standouts. I pulled this up, which is interesting. This is BP's annual report from last year, where they say, for amongst other things, we're aiming to be a net zero company by 2050 or sooner, and to help the world get there too. Here's $1 billion company putting their money into decarbonization. Other companies will say road transport accounts for nearly 20% of direct carbon dioxide emissions from fuel combustion globally. These have to be reduced to get the world to net zero. Net zero is a major milestone in the forward-looking aspects of these companies. US energy consumption by source and sector in 2021 talks about petroleum, natural gas, renewable energy, and electricity. What is absolutely amazing to me is that 90% of our energy is petroleum-based, which is gasoline, diesel, etc. And then we have electricity down at 1%. If the world is going to go to a net zero, how are we going to reduce petroleum usage to that amount and to increase electricity from 1% upwards? This is the task at hand, and we're going to be talking about that in the other upcoming videos.
Joe, in session 1, you really bring up some challenging topics.
It is interesting how the current debate seems to be focused totally on decarbonization. And you look at giant companies like BP, who have set targets to be carbon neutral by 2040.
It's quite the paradigm shift. I think in session 2, we address this a little more, looking at how some of those large conglomerates and companies are addressing this change, and indeed some of the original equipment manufacturers that we find here in the trucking industry ourselves. Perhaps we should move ahead to session 2.
Let's do that.